this bill is a step in the right direction, but they are baby steps, if you will pardon the pun. One of the strongest messages coming from last year's Jobs and Skills Summit was the economic and social benefits of stronger paid parental leave. And it was a theme that was repeated in the landmark Work and Care inquiry chaired by my colleague Senator Barbara Pocock. That inquiry has been hearing from women, families, businesses and academics around the country about the critical role that paid parental leave plays in keeping women connected to the workforce and in allowing families to juggle work and care responsibilities. A report released today from the Impact Economics and Policy Group estimates that since the introduction of paid parental leave, just a little over 10 years ago, there's been an $8.5 billion rise in GDP due to the increased participation of parents, predominantly mothers. So that report again confirms the importance of maintaining a link between parents and their workplaces during leave. Economists, families, women's organisations, unions and the business sector all agree that fairer, gender-neutral, flexible paid parental leave will unlock women's workforce participation and help close the gender pay gap, which sadly persists over decades now. Fairer paid parental leave will break down traditional gender roles and encourage more equitable sharing of care between parents. It will improve maternal and infant health by allowing time to recover from birth and establish breastfeeding where that's possible. It will give kids the best possible start, and it will set up good parenting habits for life. And yet, despite all of that, despite the clear benefits of a strong paid parental leave scheme, Australia's scheme is the second worst in the developed world. At just 18 weeks for birth parents and 2 weeks for partners prior to this bill, it falls well behind international best practice of 52 weeks, with structured use it or lose it provisions for partners and higher rates of pay. After a decade of inaction, Australia is now playing catch-up and we're going too slow. This bill is a welcome recognition of the need for reform and the recognition that the way we design parental leave needs to be stronger. And we do support, of course, the distinction, removing the distinction between primary and secondary carers that has locked mothers into the primary caring role. It's 2023 now, we can have a broader view on that. Combining the existing primary care and dad and partner leave entitlements into a single entitlement that can be shared between both parents acknowledges that both parents share a critical role and allows families to decide how they want to share that care. We support the increased flexibility in how leave can be taken and the introduction of a family income threshold to address the inequity of a family missing out because the woman is the higher income earner, a situation which does happen now because it is 2023, but which our laws had not countenanced prior to this bill. But it must be said, and it was said by almost all the submissions to the inquiry into this bill in which I participated, that much more needs to be done. This bill doesn't increase the amount of leave available to families. It does increase by 2 weeks for single parents, and of course those are predominantly women. The government has committed to a staggered increase in paid parental leave entitlements, but it's not until 2026 that those increased weeks, up to 26 weeks, will flow. Parents who've been calling for fairer leave entitlements for a decade are being asked to wait for another 3 years to get the international minimum standard. There is no reason to delay the implementation of good policy. Australian parents should have immediate access to at least 26 weeks of paid parental leave, and I'll be moving a committee stage amendment to make that so. Further, the government should be providing a pathway to 52 weeks of paid parental leave by 2030, as the ACTU, the Parenthood and many others are calling for. We welcome that this bill sets up the infrastructure for use it or lose it provisions. Co-parents, especially fathers, need encouragement, sadly, to take up more responsibility for the direct care of young children. Currently, only 1 in 20 fathers in Australia takes more than the 2 weeks of dad leave. The bulk of leave and the bulk of care still falls to mothers. The experience in other countries puts beyond doubt that use it or lose it provisions does help increase men's participation in caring, and it does so by reducing the stigma around shared care and flexible work arrangements. In Scandinavian countries, the number of fathers taking leave increased dramatically with the introduction of use it or lose it provisions. Fairer sharing of care has now been sustained for more than a decade. When Canada introduced paid parental leave on a use it or lose it basis, the percentage of partners taking leave in the first year doubled. We know that it works. We know that it creates a better system for all parents and children. So we support the introduction of a use it or lose it component to paid parental leave under this bill. However, the 2 weeks use it or lose it allocation in the bill, which effectively just replicates the existing provision for dads and partners, will not be enough to provoke that deep cultural shift towards shared care that we need. So we would like to see a significant expansion of the use it or lose it allocation. The Women's Economic Equality Task Force is, I understand, looking at this issue at the minute, and we look very much forward to seeing their recommendations implemented sooner rather than later. Use it or lose it provisions must be supported by campaigns to educate families about the benefits of shared care, incentive for employers to encourage both parents to take leave, flexible working initiatives to support juggling care responsibilities, and more affordable and accessible early childhood education and care. And when I say more affordable and accessible, I mean free early childhood education, no matter where you live. That's the kind of revolution that we need to have equality in the workforce. Critically, Services Australia also needs to ensure that its staff are trauma-informed and able to identify and respond to coercive behaviour, where abusive partners attempt to use the increased PPL flexibility as yet another weapon of control. We also support measures in the bill allowing partners to take leave, even where the birth parent does not meet the income or residency tests. This is a welcome extension of eligibility. However, the inflexible work and residency tests remain a barrier. The bar is too high and too rigid, and too many people are missing out. It's important that all families are supported to take leave in the early years of parenthood, regardless of their circumstances. My colleague Senator Faruqi will be moving an amendment to close a gap that prevents postgrad students from accessing PPL. I want to talk briefly about the rate of paid parental leave. Sadly, yet another area where Australia has fallen behind other countries. It's currently set at the woefully inadequate minimum wage, a rate which we believe should be raised for everyone, and which I might add women are disproportionately the recipients of. So it's set at that woefully inadequate minimum wage, and as no surprise, it is now one of the lowest rates of paid parental leave in the OECD. Parents taking leave to care for kids marks a significant break in their career and their earning capacity. Women who take leave often return at reduced hours, they defer promotions, they reduce their overall retirement income. Replacement wages ensure that parents are not financially punished for taking time to care for their children. Higher rates of pay would also encourage shared care. Leave paid at well below normal wages forces families to make difficult decisions about how long they can afford to take leave for and who takes it. Without a change in the payment rates, parental leave will continue to be taken by the partner earning the lower wage, and more often than not, sadly, this is still the woman. The Greens will continue to call for the rate of PPL to be increased to replacement wages, capped up to $100,000 a year. But we also note alternative models proposed by witnesses to the inquiry into this bill, including lifting the rate to the average wage, or applying a livable wage, or encouraging employers to top up government payments. The Greens urge the government to invite the Women's Economic Equality Task Force to review the options for a PPL payment rate that will incentivise parents to take their leave entitlements. Finally, we know that periods of parental leave and part-time work on return from leave have been a contributor to the superannuation pay gap. A gap in super earnings for parents taking leave compounds over time and can result in that parent, mostly women, being around $20,000 worse off in retirement. We do have a retirement income gender gap, and this is part of the reason why. It's been a long-standing policy of the Greens, of unions, of women's economic security advocates to pay superannuation on paid parental leave. This has also previously been a policy of the Labor Party. As far as gender equality measures go, it's a no-brainer, and yet it's not part of this bill. I will be moving, and in fact I do now move, a second reading amendment calling on the government to urgently reconsider that decision and include superannuation contributions on paid parental leave. And that's amendment on sheet 1827. Overall, this bill is a positive step towards fairer paid parental leave, but as I said, it's a baby step. There are equitable measures which could be taken to align Australia's paid parental leave scheme with world's best practice now, rather than waiting for later. As one of the wealthiest nations on the planet, we should be able to give all working parents and their children the quality care and early childhood education that they need. The families of Australia deserve it. And I'll, in closing, just make the point that why are we making women wait 3 more years for 26 weeks when many of our other comparable nations already have 52 weeks internationally? Why are we again making women wait for their slice of the pie when this government has $246 billion in revenue that it is choosing to continue to give to the very wealthy in the form of those stage 3 tax cuts that former Prime Minister Morrison proposed? You can't cry poor and yet dish out $246 billion in tax cuts to the wealthy. If you axed those tax cuts, you would have more than enough money to not only address the housing, the cost of living crises and the climate crisis, but you could afford to increase paid parental leave to the amount that women deserve, that parents deserve, at a proper rate for a proper amount of time, and not off in the never, never, but now.
Authorised by Elle Waters, Australian Greens, Canberra.